Griffin Hartley hadn't touched a juice box since third grade, but here he was standing in the middle of a preschool pickup line, holding one in each hand like they were grenades. "Uncle Griff," a small voice yelled before launching into his legs like a missile. Griffin stumbled back, catching the tiny human that had turned his penthouse life into a juice-stained circus. "Milo," he said, crouching down, "you tackled me again. That's 3 times this week." Milo grinned, missing his 2 front teeth. "You're slow." "I'm a millionaire, not a ninja," Griffin muttered, straightening and brushing off his tailored blazer. "Let's go before someone mistakes me for your dad." He turned, then stopped cold. A woman was walking toward them, sunlight catching in her long auburn hair, her expression focused and warm all at once. She wore a simple blouse and jeans, but somehow looked more elegant than anyone he'd seen at the Met Gala last weekend. "Mr. Hartley," she said, her voice low and calm. "Hi. I'm Mila Kensington, Milo's teacher." Griffin blinked. "You're Miss Kensington?" "I prefer Mila," she said, offering a hand. Her eyes were sharp but kind. "I wanted to talk to you about Milo's class project. Do you have a moment?" Griffin took her hand. It was soft, and for some reason he didn't let go right away. "Sure, I've got a few minutes before my next crisis," Milo groaned. "It's not a crisis, it's a conference call." Griffin shot him a look. "Traitor." Mila laughed, and Griffin felt something strange stir in his chest. They sat on the low bench near the playground while Milo ran off to chase a butterfly. Mila pulled out a folder. "We're doing a family heroes project," she said, flipping it open. "Milo wants to present someone who inspires him." Griffin raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess, the dog walker." "He picked you," Mila said, smiling. Griffin blinked. "Me," he said, and I quote, "Uncle Griff saves companies and makes lunch without burning it." Mila's eyes twinkled. "It's pretty high praise." Griffin looked over at Milo, who had climbed onto a slide backward. "He's a weird kid." "He's a sweet kid," she corrected, "and he clearly admires you. I think it's great he has you around." Griffin's expression shifted. "Yeah, well, wasn't exactly the plan." Mila tilted her head, sensing the shift in his tone. "Your brother and sister-in-law, car accident." 8 months ago," Griffin said quietly. "They asked me to take Milo if anything ever happened. I thought they were joking." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been winging it since." "I'm sorry," Mila said softly. "That's a lot to take on." He nodded. "I run a private equity firm in Midtown. I'm used to hostile takeovers, not snack time." Mila smiled gently. "Well, you're doing better than you think." Griffin looked at her, really looked. Her presence was calm, grounding even. It was the first time in weeks he didn't feel like he was sprinting just to keep up. "Maybe you could help me not ruin the poor kid," he said before he fully thought it through. She raised an eyebrow. "Are you asking me to tutor you in parenting?" "Something like that," he said. "I could use the help." There was a pause. Then she nodded, surprising him. "I'll come by tomorrow after school," Mila said. "We'll do some reading and maybe help Milo with his project." Griffin stood, extending a hand again. "Deal." This time she shook it with a smile. "See you at 4. Mila showed up the next day right on time, holding a bag of books and a tray of bakery cupcakes. Griffin opened the door, wearing a fitted navy sweater and jeans, looking more like a GQ ad than someone who hadn't slept well in a week. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. Her eyes flicked around the penthouse floor to ceiling windows, skyline views, marble counters, and a grand piano untouched in the corner. "Is this where you live?" Griffin raised a brow. "Too much. It's beautiful," she said honestly. "Just unexpected." He grinned. "I get that a lot." Milo came barreling down the hallway wearing a cape and no socks. "Miss Mila, you brought cupcakes." "You bet I did," she said, kneeling to hug him. "But only if we finish our reading first." Griffin watched the two of them settle on the couch, books spread out, laughter spilling through the room like sunlight. He stood in the kitchen, watching them with a strange ache in his chest. It wasn't until Mila looked up and caught him staring that he realized he hadn't moved in 15 minutes. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, just not used to this." "To what?" He shrugged. "A home that doesn't feel empty." Later that night, after Milo had gone to bed, Mila lingered near the door, her coat in one hand. "Thanks for today," Griffin said. "He lit up around you. He doesn't do that with everyone." "You're welcome," she said, her voice soft. He's a great kid. Griffin hesitated, then stepped closer. And you're kind of amazing. Mila looked up at him, her breath catching slightly. Griffin. I didn't expect this, he said honestly. I thought agreeing to babysit my nephew would be a logistical nightmare, and it is. But then you walked in and, Griffin, she interrupted, gently but firmly. You're overwhelmed, I get it, let's not do this tonight. He searched her eyes. I'm not saying it because I'm overwhelmed, I'm saying it because it's true. Mila's voice softened. Let's see where this goes. One step at a time. She reached up, brushing her fingers lightly against his jaw, then walked out into the night. Griffin stood there for a long time, heart pounding like he'd just stepped into something he wasn't ready for but desperately wanted. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel alone. Griffin leaned against the glass wall of his office, watching the rain streak down the windows like the city was trying to rinse itself clean. On the desk behind him, a stack of unfinished reports waited, ignored. For the first time in months, his priorities were shifting, and it unnerved him more than he wanted to admit. He turned when his assistant, Darren, knocked once and entered. You've rescheduled 3 investor calls this week, Darren said carefully. And you left the board meeting after 20 minutes. I had somewhere I needed to be, Griffin replied, pulling his tie loose. Darren hesitated. Is this about the kid? Griffin turned fully. His name's Milo, right, it's just this isn't you. You don't skip meetings for anything. Griffin crossed the room and picked up a folder. Maybe it should have been me a long time ago, have the car brought around. Where to? School pickup, he said, already walking out. When Milo ran into his arms that afternoon, damp from the rain and grinning wide, Griffin didn't care about quarterly earnings or international clients. He cared about this small, wild-hearted boy who'd cracked open something he hadn't realized was locked shut. Mila appeared a moment later, umbrella in one hand and a clipboard in the other. Her hair was slightly tousled from the wind and her cheeks were flushed from the cold. You're early, she noted. Had to beat rush hour, he replied. Or maybe I just wanted to see you. She glanced at Milo, who had launched into a puddle with both feet. He's been asking if you'll help him build his volcano tonight. Griffin reached for the umbrella in her hand. Only if you stay and make sure we don't set the kitchen on fire, she eyed him. You sure you want me there again? I'm sure I wouldn't have asked if I didn't. Back at the penthouse, Mila stood barefoot in the kitchen, helping Milo mix plaster while Griffin tried to clear enough counter space. A jazz record played softly in the background, something his brother used to love. You keep the place like a showroom, Mila said, eyeing the spotless counters. How do you live in it? I don't think I was really living in it before, he said, placing a bowl of water beside her. You and Milo changed that, she paused, her hands still. That's a big thing to say. He leaned on the counter, watching her. I don't say things unless I mean them. Mila looked up, her gaze steady. Then can I ask you something? Why haven't you hired a nanny? I tried, he admitted. Twice. Milo didn't take to them. And he hesitated. I didn't like the idea of someone else knowing him better than I did. A beat passed. Then she reached for the baking soda. That's actually kind of sweet, she said, in a controlling, mildly neurotic sort of way. He gave a low laugh. You're the first person who's called me out in years. Maybe everyone else is too afraid of your bank account. Griffin's expression shifted. And you're not. Mila looked at him, serious now. I care more about how someone treats people than how many zeros they have in their portfolio. You could live in a basement, and if you made him feel safe, it'd be enough. Griffin didn't respond right away. He watched her pour vinegar into the volcano model, and when the froth exploded over the sides, Milo screamed with joy. Later, after the mess had been cleaned and Milo had fallen asleep on the couch mid-sentence, Mila rubbed her temples and leaned against the armrest. He's got your stubbornness, she said. Griffin sat beside her, one leg stretched out, the other bent. He's got his mother's laugh. Mila turned her head toward him. You miss them? Every day, he said quietly. I still expect to get a call from my brother telling me I'm doing everything wrong. She pulled a throw blanket over Milo. You're doing more right than you think. Griffin looked at her. You always say the exact thing he needs to hear. I say what I mean, she replied. And right now, I mean this place doesn't feel like it belongs to just you anymore. He tilted his head. What does it feel like? Like it's trying to become something new, she said. Something warmer. Griffin reached over, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You're the one making it warmer. She held his gaze, her breath catching, but this time she didn't step back. You're serious, aren't you? She asked. I don't have time for games, he said. I've got a kid who depends on me and a life I never expected, but you're the first thing in it that feels like it could be mine. Mila inhaled slowly. This is moving fast, I know, he said. But I'm not asking for forever tonight. Just ask me to walk you to the elevator. Let me start there. She stood, her voice low. All right, Griffin, walk me to the elevator, he did. And when the doors closed behind her, he stared at the empty space for a long minute, heart beating like maybe, just maybe, it was finally beginning to make sense. The first time Griffin saw Mila outside of school hours in his penthouse, she was standing in the middle of a crowded bookstore in Soho, arguing with the clerk over whether a children's author had misrepresented octopuses in their latest picture book. He hadn't planned to be there. He ducked in between meetings to grab a gift for Milo's birthday, expecting a 10-minute errand. Instead, he found Mila holding 2 books in one arm and gesturing animatedly with the other. I'm just saying, she insisted, if you're going to write about marine life, at least get the number of hearts correct. The clerk, clearly out of his depth, simply nodded and backed away. Griffin stepped forward, one eyebrow raised. Are you always this passionate about cephalopods? Mila turned, startled, then laughed. Griffin, what are you doing here? He held up a wrapped package. Birthday mission. I didn't realize I'd walk into a marine biology debate. She glanced at her books. It wasn't a debate. It was a mild correction. Looked more like a full-blown trial. I take facts seriously. He reached for one of the books she was holding. Is this for Milo? She nodded. He's been asking about space lately. I figured this might spark something. Griffin hesitated, then said, There's a new planetarium exhibit opening next week. Maybe we could all go, you, me, and Milo. Mila cocked her head. You're asking me out on a date to a children's science exhibit. I'm asking you to spend time with us outside of homework and volcano disasters. She studied him for a beat. All right. But only if you promise not to correct the tour guide. I'll keep my knowledge of gravitational slingshots to myself. Later that week, the planetarium turned out to be more chaotic than expected. A field trip of 3rd graders had taken over the lobby, and Milo had gotten his shoelace stuck in the escalator grate before they even reached the main hall. Griffin knelt to untangle it, muttering, This better not be a metaphor for the rest of the night. Mila stood beside him, arms crossed, trying not to laugh. You handled that faster than I thought. I've dealt with board members who throw pens when upset. This is nothing. Inside the dome, they found seats near the back, Milo sitting between them with a bag of popcorn nearly the size of his torso. As the lights dimmed and stars filled the ceiling, Griffin leaned slightly toward Mila. Did you ever think you'd be spending your Friday night in an inflatable universe? I used to think I'd be a concert pianist by now, she whispered back. Life has a sense of humor. He glanced at her, surprised. You play? Used to, before I started teaching. Why'd you stop? She hesitated. I thought I needed something steadier. Turns out, teaching requires just as much improvisation. Griffin looked thoughtful. There's a grand piano in my apartment you might like. I noticed, she said. It's pristine. Maybe it's waiting for someone who knows what they're doing. After the show, Milo fell asleep in the backseat of the car, arms wrapped around a glowing toy planet. Griffin adjusted the mirror, watching him breathe softly. He's happy. Mila nodded. He feels safe. That matters. Griffin glanced at her. You make it easier. She turned her attention to the skyline outside the window. You ever think about why this matters to you so much? He hesitated. I think I spent a lot of years building things so I didn't have to feel anything. Then Milo showed up with a backpack and a stuffed lizard and turned everything upside down. And me, he met her eyes in the reflection. You made me want to stop running. Neither spoke for a while. When they reached her apartment, he walked her to the door. The hallway light flickered overhead, casting faint shadows across her face. I don't usually let this happen, she said softly. What's this? Letting someone in, he stepped closer. Then I'm glad I'm the exception. She hesitated, then reached up and kissed him. It wasn't hurried or uncertain. It was quiet, deliberate, like the closing of a chapter and the beginning of something neither of them had expected to write. When she pulled back, she said, "Don't make me regret this." He touched her cheek gently. "I won't." As he walked back to the car, he glanced through the window where Milo still slept, clutching his glowing planet. For the first time in years, Griffin didn't feel like he was building something for appearances. He was building a life, one that might finally mean something real. Griffin stood in the corner of the community center gymnasium, watching Milo dart between balloon towers and streamers as a DJ played something loud and chaotic. The room was packed with parents, kids, and teachers celebrating the school's spring carnival. Between the glitter face painting and a rogue popcorn machine, it felt like a small-scale circus. He wasn't used to this much color or chaos. He adjusted the collar of his dark jacket, scanning the crowd until he saw her. Mila was kneeling beside a girl in pigtails, expertly transforming a paper plate into a makeshift lion mask. Her hair was pulled into a messy braid, a pencil tucked behind her ear, sleeves rolled up as though she hadn't stopped moving since sunrise. She glanced up once, caught his eye, and her face lit up with something soft and knowing. Griffin made his way through the crowd, dodging two kids with foam swords. "You're late," she said without missing a beat. "Board meeting ran long," Griffin replied. "Ended it 5 minutes early." She looked up in surprise. "You cut a board meeting short for this." He leaned on the table beside her. "I made a choice. Turns out this was the more important room to be in." Mila held his gaze for a moment longer, then handed the lion mask to the girl and stood. "You're learning." "I had a good teacher," she tilted her head. "Is that flattery or a confession?" "Both." Just then, Milo came barreling over, breathless and red-faced. "Uncle Griff, they're starting the raffle. I put your name on the big prize." Griffin raised an eyebrow. "What prize?" "The trip to the Adirondacks, cabins and boats and everything." Mila laughed. "It's a family donation. One of the parents owns the resort." Griffin looked down at Milo. "You know I don't camp, right?" "It's not camping," Milo said. "There's a hot tub." Griffin looked at Mila. "That's not fair. You know I can't resist a hot tub." She gave him a sideways glance. "You planning on inviting me if you win?" He leaned in slightly. "I was hoping you'd already assumed so." Later that night, as the carnival wound down and the last of the booths were dismantled, Griffin found Mila near the back exit, helping a parent carry boxes of leftover supplies. "You always stay late?" he asked, taking one from her arms. "Someone has to," she said. "Most people vanish after the last balloon pops." They walked out into the cool evening air, the streetlights casting long shadows across the sidewalk. Milo was already with a sitter back at the penthouse. Griffin had arranged it so he and Mila could have time alone afterward. She paused near her car. "You're different. In a good way, in a noticeable way." Griffin took a breath. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened. About Milo, about you, about what I want." She folded her arms. "And I want to make this real, not just the dinners, not just the carnival nights. I want a life with you, with him." Mila's expression shifted, even as she tried to mask it. "That's a big leap from where we started." "I know," he said, "but I've built companies from scratch. I can build this with you." She looked down at her hands. "I've been careful, Griffin. I've seen what happens when people try to force something good to fit into a life that's not ready for it." He stepped closer. "Then let's take the time, but let's not pretend this isn't something worth building." Mila met his eyes, searching them. "I don't want to be a temporary fix." "You're not," he said. "You're the reason it all finally makes sense." She didn't answer at first, then she reached into her bag and pulled something out, a folded piece of paper, slightly crumpled. "I found this in Milo's desk drawer," she said, handing it to him. Griffin opened it. It was a drawing, stick figures of 3 people standing under a crooked sun. One tall man, one woman with long hair, one small boy holding both their hands. Above it, in crooked letters, were the words, "My family." He looked up, throat tight. "I didn't tell him to draw that," she said quietly. "That came from him." Griffin folded the paper carefully, like it was made of glass. "Then I won't waste another second pretending I don't want the same thing." Mila's voice was barely above a whisper. You really mean this? I've never meant anything more. He took her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. They stood there on the sidewalk, the city humming around them, something quiet and steady unfolding between them. Weeks later, Griffin walked into the music room of his penthouse and found Mila sitting at the piano, her fingers moving gently over the keys. She didn't look up right away, just kept playing, the melody soft and full of something that wrapped around his chest and stayed there. Milo sat on the floor nearby, coloring with a focus usually reserved for building elaborate pillow forts. Griffin leaned in the doorway, watching them, the weight of the past few months settling into place like the final piece in a puzzle. When she finally looked up, he said, "Play that again." Mila smiled. "You like it?" "I love it," he said. "It sounds like home." She patted the bench beside her. "Then sit down, it's a duet." He did. And when Milo looked up and grinned, Griffin knew this wasn't just a chapter. It was the story he hadn't known he'd been waiting to write. The sky over Manhattan was a pale shade of gold, clouds shifting like slow breath over the skyline. And Griffin stood in the back garden of the school with a clipboard in hand and the faintest crease between his brows. "Why do these tables all look like they were arranged by a blind squirrel?" he muttered. "Because you're trying to control an elementary school graduation," Mila said, stepping behind him with a tray of lemonade. "You're used to boardrooms, not folding chairs and glitter signs." He turned. "I'm used to things making sense." "They do," she replied, "just not in spreadsheets." Griffin leaned against the picnic table, watching as Milo ran across the grass in his miniature cap and gown, his arms stretched like airplane wings. "He's going to grow up faster than I can track." "You're not supposed to track it," she said, setting the tray down. "You're supposed to be there for it." He looked at her, his eyes softer than they used to be. "I'm trying, you're doing it," she said, brushing an invisible crumb from his jacket. "You just don't see it yet." The ceremony began with a small chorus of overly enthusiastic kindergartners performing a song about friendship and clouds. Mila sat beside Griffin in the front row, her hand resting lightly on his knee. When Milo's name was called, and he marched across the makeshift stage with his paper diploma, Griffin clapped louder than anyone else. Afterward, while the crowd filtered out into the courtyard for cupcakes and juice cartons, Griffin pulled Mila aside into the shade of the old maple tree by the fence. "I've been thinking," he said, his tone low but certain. Mila raised an eyebrow. "Dangerous start." "I know I've never done anything slowly. I move fast, I decide fast, I fall fast. You think you've fallen. I know I have," he said. "And it's not just about what we've built with Milo, it's you. I want mornings with you. I want the quiet, the chaos, all of it." She studied him, her arms folded. "You're not asking for easy." "I'm not expecting it," he said, "but I'm offering everything I have. I bought the brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. The one with the garden you said reminded you of your grandmother's place." Her breath caught. "I want us to live there," he continued, "the three of us. Not in a penthouse that echoes when it's quiet. Somewhere that feels like ours. That's a big shift." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. "And I want to build it with you as my wife." Mila stepped back, the world momentarily still. "Griffin, no pressure, no fireworks. Just me, asking the only question that matters." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, with a sapphire stone flanked by 2 small diamonds, nothing flashy, just her. "You didn't want a life built on appearances," he said. "So I'm offering one built on love." She reached out, running her thumb over the edge of the ring. "You remembered what I said about sapphires." "I remember everything you say." She didn't speak for a moment, then she nodded once. "Yes." Griffin's breath released like a dam giving way. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms. She kissed him under the tree, the sound of children laughing in the distance, and for once, the world didn't feel like it was tilting out of reach. 6 months later, the brownstone smelled like cinnamon and honey. Autumn leaves clung to the windows and a fire crackled in the hearth. Mila stood in the kitchen, barefoot, flipping pancakes while Milo sat at the counter, reading aloud from a space book. "Did you know Saturn has 62 moons?" he asked between bites. 63, Griffin corrected, walking in with flour on his shirt. One was just discovered last month. Milo narrowed his eyes. You're making that up. Griffin kissed Mila's cheek. Check page 82, she smiled, sliding a pancake onto a plate. You two should host your own science show. As long as I get to wear a cape, Milo added. Later that evening, after Milo was asleep upstairs and the fire had dimmed to embers, Griffin wrapped his arms around Mila on the couch. Do you regret it? He asked quietly. Regret what? Saying yes. She turned to face him fully. Not for a second. You gave up a lot. I gained more, she said, her voice steady. A family, a home, a future I actually want. He brushed his fingers along her jaw. I used to think success was about numbers. Now I know it's about moments like this. She leaned into him, their fingers intertwined. Then you're finally rich in all the ways that count. Outside, the city slept beneath a blanket of stars, the brownstones standing warm and alive in the quiet street. Inside, laughter and love stitched the walls tight around them, a life not hurried but deeply felt. And for the first time in forever, everything was exactly where it belonged.